Forward TV. The world is thinking.
And I just wanted to make 3 points, really, about things that I think are, in a sense, flaws that were part of the 60s inheritance. But I would say that I am somebody whose life has been irreversibly changed by the overturn of the kind of restrictions that people like me would have had to live under before the 60s. So I don't come here with criticisms that are on that bandwagon that says somehow the 60s is responsible for all our ills. What I suppose I'd like to do is frame it in the following ways. I think that there was a flowering of individualism, but what that led to, in a sense, is a form of gross selfishness. So people talk about themselves or their families, and actually what that does is that atomizes society to quite some extent. And the second thing is that it either spread into that kind of selfishness and individualism, or what it did, there was a kind of sclerotic collectivism that then became that kind of inflexible, kind of unpleasant trade unionism that was the hallmark of the 70s, really. And I think there are 3 key issues for me in there. One is the failure of politics in the 60s to make real alliances between identity politics and the politics of class and poverty. The second thing is the restriction of identity politics and where that's left us now. And the third thing is the point that James made, which is about authority. Very quickly on the alliances thing, I mean, I think there's a real failure to knit together the politics, and it's a rare politician that can knit together the politics of the kind of, if you like, syndicalism in the 70s. Politics which is really about class and poverty, and the other side, which is politics which is about identity. And I mean, for myself, I mean, I went to Sussex University, so of course I was a Maoist as soon as I got there. Naturally. But, it was one of those things we kind of left Maoism after a few weeks, because I always said that I didn't mind being called bourgeois, but I did object to them characterizing me as a deviation. And, there was no meeting point between what you saw then as kind of left radicalism in the student movement and identity politics. They were of a completely different kind and nature. And therein, though, the knitting together of those things, therein lies one of the great nuggets of true radicalism, is when we can knit together notions of identity linked to those key kind of underlying issues. And you still see it. You can see it in Obama's poll numbers, is that notwithstanding that actually holds up really well for Democrats with the blue-collar workers, actually what you realize is that it's graduates and undergraduates who are people who are supporting him, and that actually the liberal views are still the product of the middle class to a large extent, and bread and butter issues are still the territory of the working class. We haven't knitted those together. That's a flaw. I suppose the second thing is identity politics, which is that actually identity politics was necessary for the time, but it's absolutely now had its time. And people find that very, very hard to recognise. It tells you practically nothing now to say that somebody's gay or black or a Muslim or a woman. It tells you practically nothing about them. It tells you practically nothing about their life chances any longer. The idea that gay men, for instance, are as a group discriminated against really does fly in the face, doesn't it, of a thrice-appointed cabinet minister, now recently appointed to the Lords, who holidays in Corfu. You cannot call that in any real sense discrimination. We know that when the fist hits your nose and you get called a queer, then we know that the group has some validity. But actually the idea of identity politics built around these monolithic groups that somehow share a sense of either discrimination or, on the other side of it, life chances, is something that really doesn't bear examination in the face of the real change that's happened since that period. So we radically now need to look at the intersection between the group and the individual when we start to talk about identity politics. And if you talk to kids these days, particularly, about what their identity is and where it is and how fluid it is, one can put endless examples. A friend of mine's kid the other day got an award in school for the highest achieving black kid in school. He said, I'm not taking that. Wouldn't have it. Wouldn't go. Just wouldn't accept the award. I went and saw a football match him and his mates were playing the other day, and the teams were the black team against the white team. Interesting thing is, the black team's not all black and the white team's not all white. It's a much more complex cultural thing. It's to do with the music and the clothes you wear, and it's constantly interchangeable. So that needs to be. And the third thing is this question of authority that James brought up. There's no doubt about it that we all benefited from the tearing down of those kind of authorities. However, I think what we've lost is the ability to construct an authority to which we feel we are able to subscribe. And I don't want to go back over the Brand Ross thing, but just as an example, one of the things that really struck me was how difficult the BBC found it instantly to make a view with confidence because they suddenly feared losing the young audience. Or the idea that an institution, our national institution, can't make some kind of moral, clear judgment seems to me to imply a lack of confidence, not in a particular authority, but actually in the notion of authority at all. So you then descend into a kind of ghastly form of relativism that starts talking about practices as somehow culturally specific, as if that somehow gave them a credibility, out with fundamental values that we could adduce together, decide whether it's about behaviour or whether it's about speech or whatever. So we've left ourselves, I think, finding it very difficult to exert authority. And the great example of this is if you look at the way so many people parent. They parent by negotiation, and they parent as the kind of people they want to be seen. So you have an absurd situation where you see parents asking 3-year-olds, what do you want for supper? This is completely balmy. Kids want the protection of parents. They want parents to be strong and solid and secure. That's the right of the child. But what parents do is they become over-permissive and they get frightened of just the notion of authority itself.